All right, what's up with it? This is Ray Azul Sovereign, otherwise known as Mr. Mad Dog Blue, also known as Senor Demetrio de la Rosa, right? And you're listening to Toady Mode, right? Toady Mode TV. You're gonna hear the dog barking in the background, so try to ignore that. It just so happens that where I'm situated, there's a couple of nasty pit bulls, right? One over the fence over here, and then on the other side of my house, there's another one, and then there's a real big bulldog inside this place. So, and that's not to mention the fofo bulldog, my motherfucking pet, right? So anyway, that was a little wheezy Jeezy right there, a little jokey joke, a little versey verse, right? Because I am hip hop. That's why. Because I am hip hop, right? I'm the fifth element of hip hop. I'm living, breathing hip hop. I don't have to rap, and I don't have to rhyme, and I don't have to be good with no turntables, and I don't even gotta know how to break dance because I'm the fifth element of hip hop because I know how to read. I learned how to read a book and tell people what's in it inside of books I didn't write. Talking shit about places I went on vacation that are mentioned in books I didn't write. I'm the ambassador of Mexico because I went to Mexico before and I read books about Mexico. And I got a baby mama and she's Mexican. And so, you know, I'm the ambassador. I didn't name myself that. Somebody else called me the ambassador of Mexico. So I'm just the ambassador of Mexico. You know what I'm saying? And that's how we get down. Anyway, we're going to get right to it. We're talking about, obviously, again, and it's been a while, it's been a minute, but we're talking about Moorish Berber Bey, Sabir Bey, the Moor, the Mega Moor. Ain't nobody more special than that Moor right there. And his drivel, right? The shit he spews on his podcast, right? Where he claims to be educating people, where he claims to be teaching people the secrets of themselves, right? Their African roots that goes back to the Spanish Crusades and this sort of shit, right? It's all the most ridiculous malarkey, and it's obviously I don't like it for several reasons. First, I'm gonna touch on this first, right? That dude, I don't know why he feels like he's the first person on earth to discuss Moors or Moorish history or who the Moors were as a people, who the Moors are in history books, etc., etc. Connect that to Phoenicians, connect that to whatever he connects that to. I don't know why he believes he's the first person to do that. It's a trip to me, right? But it reminds me of when I was in middle school. I was attending La Mesa Middle School as a teenager. And that obviously was in La Mesa. Well, not obviously, but that was in La Mesa, California, which is a community that's located within the city of La Mesa. However, the city of La Mesa is within the confines of the county of San Diego. So La Mesa is considered San Diego. However, it's the city of La Mesa. Anyway, we had a Renaissance fair, and I was in gifted classes at the time. Like, the classes that I was, the classes I was participating in at that time in middle school were some of them were even better than the AP classes that these kids get now in high school. I mean, they were highly advanced level classes. Anyway, that's besides the point. One of my favorite subjects in school was history. Another was science. So I would pay close enough attention in history class, right? I got pretty good grades as far as the academics were concerned. Obviously, my behavior always needed improvement. Every now and then, I was satisfactory to them people, and every now and again, also, I was unsatisfactory to those people, which in 2020 hindsight, right? I'm sure I can find some people of color who will sympathize with me, right? They'll say, that's okay. We understand. You're highly intelligent. They were threatened by your intelligence. They were threatened by you, period, baby, right? Some of these older women will nurture me, right? And they'll say, they're just threatened by your being, period. And so as such, they're holding you to a standard that is not reasonable, right? And that happens nowadays as well. Happens every day, happens in every society, right? They hold certain people, certain groups of people, certain personas, personalities, types of people to a standard that these other people don't get held to that standard. They don't have to worry about none of that, right? They just get marched right on through the system, right? However, that's besides the point. That's not the point of discussion right now. So we had a Renaissance fair, right? And I remember, some of my family members were getting me prepared to participate in this grandiose Renaissance event, right? It was just going to be way too cool, way too exciting, right? So I remember that, I didn't have any costume to wear. I didn't have anything to dress up as. I was, kind of bummed about that shit. And, the people that my aunt and my uncle, my aunt and my uncle, who were my great aunt and my great uncle, they were pretty well to do. I mean, they were, middle class. I wouldn't say they were lower middle class. They were middle class. Of course, to us, they was rich, right? That's the way we felt about that shit. Like they were wealthy, okay? And so it just so happened, well, at the time, my great uncle, he was much taller than myself. But he had a costume from a Renaissance fair that he went to with his wife. And actually it wasn't from a Renaissance fair. It was more like some shit that, they would wear in Jerusalem or something, right? That they would wear back in the biblical ages, right? So that predates medieval time, right? Should predate medieval history, which Sabir Bey doesn't also seem not to understand the timeline as it pertains to certain events that took place in certain places over certain periods, et cetera, right? But I remember saying, well, what am I gonna be? What am I gonna dress as? Who am I gonna be? At this Renaissance fair. And he pulled out this it was like I don't want to call it a tunic, but it was like a gown. It was almost like a robe kind of thing, right? It was appropriate for the period of time, right? And I'm like, okay, well, now what? And it was like, that's it, right? And obviously would not be considered people of color, although they're not. And this is a problem that I have, and we're going to touch on this in a minute, right? This black and white thing. But I'm going to tell the story first. So he had me this costume, and I'm looking at them like, now what? And his wife was like, pick out your hair, blow your hair out pretty much. We to just go. And I'm like, what? It doesn't make any sense. I'm not understanding that I'm already all the way dressed like an Ethiopian Orthodox, right, character from the Bible, right, or from the Ethiopian Bible. It's not even touching me at that time. Then this is what they told me, right? They said, well, I don't want to say it fucked up, but this is exactly the way it got told to me, right? My uncle's wife told me, wrap a towel around your head and tell them that you're a Moor. And I was like, what? You know what I mean? What is a Moor? That don't make no sense. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And they're like, you're reading about Phoenicians and you're reading about Muslims and you're reading about Saracens and all these things, right? Yes, I am reading all of that stuff right now in my 7th grade history class. Okay, well, wrap a towel around your head, right? This still kind of fucks with me because that's one of the the bad terms, one of the prejudice slang words, to say for a Muslim, right? They call them towheads or some shit like this, which we're not supposed to say, right? So hopefully YouTube doesn't bang on me about that. Really, truly, this is what happened. So yeah, she's like, wrap a towel around your head and tell them that you're a Moor. And I'm like, what? I laughed at her. Like, it didn't make any sense, right? And they both looked at each other and they looked at me. And, I went and I didn't wrap the towel around my head, but I definitely wore, I blew out my afro. And I went, and when people asked, what are you dressed as? What is your costume? And I told them, even my teachers and my counselors, the staff at the school, they're like, that's so interesting. This is right. This is nice. What are you? I guess they was expecting I was gonna say I'm a carpenter, or I'm saying I'm a serf, right? I'm one of these guys that tills the fields or something like this, right? No, I told them I'm a mower, right? And they were low-key flabbergasted. They was like, what? How do you know anything about such a thing, right? But that was the first time I had personally heard the term Moor, right? That in addressing a person and addressing a human being, like as to address a culture, it was from them. And it's a trip. As I stated already, they're not black, right? They would not be considered African anything, right? If they do have African DNA, it's probably of an extremely minuscule percentage, right? Which is fine. I mean, that means it's still there. That means it's still part of who and what they are. And that blood over generations, over time, was washed out to a percentage less than 10%, right? That happens. I have my DNA reports, so I know my percentages as that pertains to different areas or of peoples of different areas of the world as far as concentration is concerned. And I also have certain areas, certain, ethnicities or a certain background that has certain groups of people less than 10%. Right. And so because I've done a lot of study and a lot of research, I know what that means. Actually, that means that the further back you go, obviously that percentage becomes more pure. Right. So in learning this, I learned to pinpoint, as far as timelines are concerned, or as far as history is concerned, which of my ancestors are my old blood and which of my ancestors, or which of my ancestral breakdown, my DNA profile from 23andMe, right? Which parts of that would be considered new blood? You see what I'm saying? Most people who look into their DNA, look into their genealogy, look into the way these sorts of things work, they don't think like that at all. In fact, I don't know anyone that I've had any discussion with that has looked into things in that manner. There may be one or two people who also have stumbled upon the fact of the way that works. However, they're not people of color, right? These are people who are studying their Nordic or Welsh or Viking, however you want to say it. They're studying their European and Scandinavian ancestry and pinpointing different areas in a timeline to where their DNA or their ancestors were more pure-blooded as further back in the timeline. That's difficult to do. That's not easy to do, especially if you're 80% African, right? Then you're going to be able to tell to yourself you're African from old up to now, right? To the new age. However, mixed people tend to have additives, right? Or tend to have blood that's not, it is old blood, it is ancient blood. However, it's from a different area. It's going through a different cycle. It's going through a different chain of events. You see what I'm saying? So the Europeans' DNA, the Southern Europeans' DNA, is going to be different than the Northern Europeans' DNA. And this is all based on the concept of speciation, or the science of speciation, right? And so when we go into what is speciation, right? So let's have a look at what the internet has to say. I know that there are a few different types, and I've posted them previously. However, I like to look at the picture here. It helps me to explain it perfectly. And that's what we like. We like perfect explanations. We don't like these bullshit, half-cocked, strange, ideological explanations that then turn into just believe what I'm telling you because I'm trying to create this romantic fantasy that allows you to escape your blackness, or allows you to escape your own history by merging your identity with this other group that just so happens to be a person of color as well. However, you're merging your identity into theirs in order to avoid your heritage or the timeline or whatever it is that is specific to you and your family and your lineage and your DNA, right? And so that leads to what we have with the person Tariq Nasheed and the foundational Black Americans, right? They're claiming a specific lineage. They're claiming a specific group of people that experienced a specific set of circumstances across a period of time or over a timeline. It happened to those people. It didn't happen to the people that even are the original stock of those people, right? So let's say Nigerians, people from Ghana, people from Cameroon, people from the Bight Biafra, which is Nigeria, et cetera, et cetera. But you got these different groups, right? And so in Cuba, it's easier to explain. On the islands, it's easier to explain because there's entire religions and entire cultural and spiritual practices that are built around this history, that are built specifically to preserve that history, so that the people later on, right, the progeny later, are able to understand exactly what happened without being confused, right? Without it being some type of mystery. I mean, it is a mystery because you have to be part of a mystery school, what some people consider to be a mystery system, in order to understand it, right? But once you're involved, once you're there, once you're with them, you sit with them, they explain it to you, bam, it all makes perfect sense, right? Now, I'm not going to divulge any secrets, right? However, I am going to explain how on the islands, specifically Cuba, Puerto Rico, Jamaica to an extent, as well as Haiti, those places, which is also the Dominican Republic, right? That's Hispaniola is the name of that island proper. Some people don't know that Haiti and the Dominican Republic are both countries on one island, right? They think that those are both separate islands. They don't know, right? So you have, and they don't know because of what I'm explaining right now, which is speciation, right? The things that happen to one group of people, even though the original stock of those people may be the same, right? Those people who went out into the diaspora, or those people who branched off in these other directions, did not experience those same effects, right? Or were not part of the same causes to lead to specific effects, right? Which creates a separation, right? That separation is what we know as far as Darwinism is concerned, or as far as the science of speciation and specification, right? We know that to be called what? Divergence. It's when one group diverges from another, right? As opposed to convergence, right? Which is where out of meaning one, right? So the United States would be a society based on convergence, right? Divergence would be separation, and as such, speciation can be speciation happens in both directions, right? It happens due to population bottlenecking, which I have explained in previous recordings and in previous videos. And I will go over those things again. That's no problem. It's easy to explain. However, I'm not going to do that now. We're going to stick solely to speciation and the different types of speciation, right? So the 4 different types of speciation are allopatric speciation, peripatric speciation, paraspecific speciation, and sympatric speciation. Let me look at this again just to make sure that... Okay, let me take that back. We have allopatric speciation, peripatric speciation, parapatric speciation, and sympatric speciation. The other peripatric is PERI, and then there's PARA, right? Patrick speciation. And then it shows the way that these different types of speciations work, right? One is due to a barrier formation. Another is due to a genetic polymorphism. Another is due to, isolation. And then it shows the distinct species after equilibration of new ranges, right? So it says that allopatric speciation is the mode of speciation in which the original population is divided into 2 by a barrier, resulting in reproductive isolation. So as soon as you take Africans from Africa and you put them in Cuba as chattel, right, that's going to automatically become allopatric speciation. You're going to have another group. You're going to have another clan. You're going to have a division, right, within that group, as long as they only stick with each other, right? And I was explaining this to someone not too long ago, the way that some of the Native American tribes tended to kidnap women as well as trade women and things like this, and how that, there were war parties and there were raids and things like this, and that oftentimes would change the heritage of the tribes or the clans involved. Also, though, that there was, how do I say it? That was kind of a thing where groups of Native Americans would also branch off, right? So they would come to a fork in the road type of a situation. They would have meetings. They would say, you know what? We want to go this way, right? And part of the tribe would say, no, we don't want to go, right? Part of the tribe would say, well, we want to move on because this land has been hunted down and it's not producing the way that it was when we first got here, right? And part of the clan would say, no, we don't want to go. This is our home. We have pregnant women. We have children running around right here. And we're not situated to leave this area right now. So part of the tribe or part of the clan would then leave wherever they were settled at that particular time and look for new hunting ground or look for a new area to then set up a new settlement Oftentimes the settlements were temporary. However, every now and then they'd find an area that the conditions were great. And so they would settle permanently there. That tended to be only where the conditions was ripe. And they could say, you know what, we could just stay right here. We're good to go. What would cause them to leave? The weather patterns would cause them to leave. Different severe weather, right? Different tribes, incursions from other tribes would cause them to leave. Because if you settle somewhere, obviously the enemy's moving around out there, or these other tribes are moving around out there, and eventually they're going to come across you. They're going to see the pyres of smoke in the air, because at this time people knew how to cook, right? So they would see the smoke in the air from the fires to keep warm or whatever it is, and that's how they would figure out where different settlements were or where different camps were, right? And I was explaining this to someone as we were on top of a mountain, you know, and the lookout was, I could see for 20 miles or 40 miles in one direction, and in 360 degrees, actually, in every direction. So it was a trip, and it was beautiful to see. Anyway, I was explaining how that's kind of how the tribal situation worked. Was, you know, sometimes different tribes wouldn't want to leave. They would want to stay right there, and because the land was good to them, right? But then, you know, other groups of people would say, no, we want to move on from here, and they would split, they would divide. And so that's how they ended up saying, like, okay, well, we're such and such clan from the Shoshone people, right? Why are they Shoshone people? Because they all come from the same group. However, these clans branched off, right, for different reasons, right? And then they become, eventually, if they stay away from their own people, they become a new people, right? They become a specific type of this new people. They may have come from those other people, right? They may be the antecedents of those other people. However, they are something else now, right? And that is being explained in this definition of allopatric speciation, which is automatically, no matter what, 1,000% the way things work when you're looking into so-called black people or the black race, right? Right? These are people that come from various tribes all over Africa, various civilizations, different civilizations even, right? Because that's the thing that we're not looking into. It's like, oh, well, they were all tribes, they were all this, they were all that. No, these were different civilizations of people that just happen to have a certain color of skin, right? That happen to be dark skinned, complected from yellow to red to black, right? Or very, 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 very dark brown. I'm talking about almost indistinguishable from black. You see what I'm saying? But they're different civilizations. They're different people. That's like how here in America, people will say, oh, Mexicans are this and Mexicans are that. Mexicans are a mixture of people. They're not just a mixture of Spaniards and Indians, or French people and Indians, or Native Americans, however we'd like to say this. They're also a mixture of these different tribes that were already in Mexico, or that were already in South America, right? Some of which are still separated, some of which they know that they're not the same. Some of them are the same. However, different areas, and that's the way colonization works, right? So different areas, the people in Brazil are from a different lineage, a different bloodline. They have a different constitution, a different makeup, a different biological timeline than the people in Mexico, right? Brazil had a specific set of circumstances, the way things happen for people in that area, as opposed to the way that things happen for people in California or Texas, right? Tejanos. Their stories are similar, but they're not the same. They're very different. because these were different groups, these were different people, these were different tribes, these were different civilizations, even you know, totally different cultures. They were on very different paths of, I don't want to say evolutionary paths, but they were on different cultural paths in the way that they did things, and as a people, and as such, they were forced to mix. Some of them were not. Some of them were absolutely forced into isolation, and they were isolated, right? Which is why in Mexico, in South America, you have some people who have ancient, I'm talking about some of the oldest blood. It's ancient. It's ancient. it, just as ancient as any African can be. Their blood is ancient. You see what I'm saying? And it's isolated. It's pure, right? They haven't been mixed. They find civilizations in South America all the time, or they used to. I don't know if they're still doing this, right? But they were finding people them people didn't even wear no clothes. They don't take any vaccinations, and that's the thing, right? Modern people would show up, and their whole civilization would start to get sick. They would die off from all of these viruses and all of these, nasty bacteria that civilized man, right, which we're supposed to be part of, right? Civilized man carries all these germs and all of these bacterias and all these viruses that don't kill us, right? We've gained immunity to those particular pathogens, right? But should these other people become exposed to those pathogens, it can wipe their entire people out. You see what I'm saying? It's a trip. And this lends also further to the science of speciation, right? Because can you say that we're all the same if the same shit don't kill us, right? So if me just standing next to you and sneezing on you could cause for you to die, because you don't have the antibodies, you don't have the bacteria, you don't have the genetic mutations, right? You don't have the mutagens in your body that allow for you, or the mutated genes, that's a mutagen, right, is a mutated gene. You don't have the mutagens in your body that allow for you to fight off the common fucking cold, but then you could live butt naked. This is what is a trip, and this should really trip people. I mean, people should look further into this sort of stuff. These people can live in the jungle, in a damn typhoon, stung by 9 trillion mosquitoes or whatever it is, right? They don't die. It doesn't hurt them. They're okay. In fact, sometimes it looks like mosquitoes don't even want to drink from them no more, right? Which would be a trip, right? Okay, but these people have certain immunities, right? They have certain strengths that the common man right now, if you from the United States, if you drop them off in the jungle, if you watch Naked and Afraid, they be having a hard time making it 2 weeks. They're like, oh, Randy survived 3 weeks, 21 days, and butt naked in the jungle, right? But can he survive 21 months butt naked in the jungle? Right? That's a good question. The first time he really got a fever or really was injured, would that man survive those circumstances, right? Or would the production team have to go in there and pull his ass out of there before his gangrene killed him or whatever, before some bacteria, right, some virus killed him, right? They would definitely go get him, right? The production team would. Right? Who goes and gets those Aboriginal people or those people who live in the forest, in the damn jungle, butt naked right now? You see what I'm saying? So anyway, I'm digressing, but these are interesting points, right? How could it be that the elements don't hurt them, right? That they can survive the elements easy, or than they can survive standing next to me and you, right? Just being in the presence of one another will cause for that other organism to deteriorate, right? Which to me, and I've explained this before as well, this is part of that racism problem that the world experiences, right? If we looked at each other more as as cellular creatures, cellular organisms, that if we're within each other's range, there are different causes and effects, right? The same as cancer cells tend to invade healthy cells, et cetera, right? Unless they're fought off with, healthier cells, right? Or unless there is some type of, remedy in that takes place. It's war, right? It's scientifically, cellular biology is war, and it's a trip. This is the war house. This is still the motherfucking war house, right? And so I have absolutely analyzed all of this type of information, all of this type of data from that angle, right? How is it that the white blood cell and the red blood cell interact? And then why is it that the black cell would kill you? Now that's racist as fuck, right? So don't take it personally what it is that I'm explaining, right? This is just an explanation. And these are things that I've thought of, right? Why is it that necrosis, right, is necrosis, right? Why does necrosis work the way that necrosis works, right? However, again, I'm digressing. Whole nother chain of thought. Maybe we'll go over that stuff at a later date. Right now, we're still discussing allopatric speciation. It says the model for allopatric speciation was presented by Mayer. It is based on the concept that new species arise when some physical geographic barrier divides the large population of a species into two or more smaller populations. So, what physical geographic barrier would it be that has divided Africans from Africa from Africans in America? Well, that would be the Atlantic Ocean. Automatic. Okay, it says the individuals of these isolated populations cannot interbreed because of their physical isolation. So, the original people together, they might have been one at this point, but as soon as you take them away from each other, they no longer are sharing a genetic bond anymore, right? And over time, that bond becomes more and more obvious or more complete, right? Is a way that I would say it. Which leads me to, and I'll explain this, so in Cuba and in other places, they know which tribes were brought to those islands. They had to make choices and had to make decisions, right? They knew that they were mixing. They knew that they were interbreeding, right? They knew, okay, we're from the Congo and you're from the Delta and you're Igbo and we're this over here, right? And how do we keep track of it? That's part of why the Orisha system came to be. That's part of why the Orishas came to be. That's part of why in Santeria you have the three systems that are one system, right? You have the Holy Trinity, right? Which is Catholicism, Yoruba, and Ifa, right? Is another way to say it. But no, we're gonna take that away because Ifa is Yoruba, right? But Palo Mayombe, right? So that would be the Trinity in Cuba, right? Or that would be the trifecta of Cuban spirituality, right? As far as plantation spirituality is concerned. Obviously, excuse me. Obviously, there were also Muslims there. There were also Hindu people there. But the three main elements are Yoruba, Congo, and Catholicism, right? Three different groups of people with one heritage, one lineage, because they mixed, because their destinies became intertwined, right? Because the history of what happened through Cuba is specific, right? Speciation is specific. It requires specificity. Okay, so in Cuba, there was specific things that happened. Specific tribes were brought there. People mixed, and they didn't want to lose track of who they were and where they came from. So they mixed things together because they had to, because they're now a mixed people, right? They don't want to forget who they are. They don't want to not honor their ancestors. They don't want to forget where they came from, right? So in turn, what they end up having to do is they end up having to accept their Spanish part of themselves, right? The Congo part of themselves, and the Yoruba part of themselves, right? The Nigerian part of themselves. Speciation. They're now a different group, right? They're no longer, yes, they have family in Nigeria, but they also have family in the Congo, and they also have family in Spain, right? This is a new kind of person. This is a new group of people. They can look back to Nigeria and say that's home. They can look back to the Congo. They can look back to Bantu people and say that's home. They can also look to Spain and in some areas more Brazil than Cuba. They can look back to Portugal, right? Portugal is more of a Brazilian thing, less so a Spanish, right? Sort of mixture. And then some people will say, well, Portugal and Spain are side by side. And then I will say to you, Haiti and the Dominican Republic are also side by side. They're side by side on the island. And when I tell you those two cultures, those two groups of people are very different. I mean, it's that no one in their right mind would venture to say that those two groups of people are the same. Culturally, ethnically, historically, no matter how you try to slice it. I mean, they're different people. So, speciation. You have to excuse me. The air is dry in here right now. I need to bring a humidifier into this room. So it says physical isolation might occur due to physical barriers like vast expanses of ocean, right? Of course. High mountains, glaciers, deep river valleys, wide rivers or deserts, or considerable distance due to a larger geographical range. Everything I just explained, okay? Even as that pertains to Native Americans and Indian, well, what people would consider to be Native American or First American or however we're calling it now, those tribes. Because if you don't notice, they done switched their names up too. So they're saying, oh, first we were Negroes, then we were black, and now we're African American. Well, first they were Indians, and then they were Native Americans, and now they're First Americans, and who knows what the name will be tomorrow. We're not, people of color, as that pertains to what people would consider to be black people, don't have this isolated struggle the way that most black people feel. Like most black people feel like, oh, this happened to us, and it only happened to us, and it only happened this way. No, homeboy, that shit happened all over America, nigga. That shit happened in Australia. That shit happened all over the place. They were fucking and killing Native Americans just as hard, if not harder, than they were ever raping and destroying African Americans. And, as that stuff starts to come out, it's a trip, because how can I say that? How can I mean that? Well, one group was being destroyed, right? The Native American people were being cleared from the North American plate, right? And Africans were prolific during the same time, right? whether it was due to breeding or chattel or whatever the fuck, whatever the reason is, they're gonna come up with it. While one group was being exterminated, the other group was being brought to being prolific. Anyhow, excuse me. So we can continue forward. We can say, okay, each isolated population starts to adapt to their separated environments while accumulating differences and evolving independently into new species. Right, so in this particular article, they're probably talking about finches or, some sort of cat or, some other kind of bird. Whereas this information absolutely applies to human beings. It says allopatric speciation can occur even in cases in which the barrier allows some individuals to cross the barrier to mate with members of the other groups. Same as I've explained. It says for speciation to even be considered allopatric, gene flow between the soon-to-be species must be significantly reduced, but it doesn't have to be entirely reduced to zero. Exactly what I just explained, especially as that pertains to Native Americans. Examples of allopatric speciation. The classic example of allopatric speciation is that of Darwin's finches. The divergent populations of finches inhabiting the Galapagos Islands were observed to have differences in features, such as body size, color, and beak length or shape. The differences resulted because of the different types of food available in various islands. Another example is of Grand Canyon squirrels, which were separated during the formation of the Grand Canyon and resulted in two different species of squirrels. Whew, shit, pardon me. So now I'm going to leave that there. At my next recording, I'm going to go over parapatric speciation. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stretch this out and we'll discuss the different types of speciation again, right? We'll go into detail about it again, right? Why do I have to discuss some things again when I've already discussed them? Well, there was a time that my channels were being knocked down. There were people having my, stealing my information pretty much and having my pages knocked down for frivolous reasons. And that didn't start happening until I started having discussions with these fake ass Freemasons that call themselves Moors, right? It wasn't until I started dealing with those people, having discussions with them, participating in their discussions and all that sort of shit. It wasn't until I crossed paths with those people, those so-called brothers, that I started having those problems. And so I would say I probably started doing certain research and making certain recordings. I really, really got into it around probably 2012. And in different areas of discussion, whether it was science, spirituality, occultism, whatever you want to call it, religion, history. Over time, those pages had been knocked down. and I had to start over again. All the information I have would get lost. Then it would happen again after 2 years, 3 years. The page would get knocked down. I would have to start over again. All that information would get lost. And again, it was always these weird ass fez heads, right? It was always these weird ass Negroes who claimed the East Coast area around Philadelphia, right? Around Connecticut. Always them fucking weirdos were some way, somehow tied to whatever was going on. It was either them or it was groups of women who identified as witches. Some of them were getting me too, right? But for the majority, and really what it is because certain, so those fake ass Moorish people, they like to, anywhere spirituality, anything spiritual is being discussed, anything that will give them power in speech, them motherfuckers will try to be there. They would try to show up there. They would try to, whether they're there just to listen and then represent that shit themselves to a whole nother group of people as if they thought of that shit out of their own brilliant fucking minds, or whether it's in discussion, right? Because you're correcting them. Some of them say the most ridiculous shit. And I know, here's what I noticed, right? They say the dumbest shit and then people correct them. And they act like they already knew whatever the correction was. However, they didn't. And so what they do is, as soon as they could get away from the situation, then they study it. Then they go look up what it is that this other person told them that they didn't know nothing about, that was on topic with what it is that they were trying to explain. However, it corrected what they did not know. And they go look it up. They go study it. They go try to figure it out, right? So then the next time they encounter a person, that argument won't be there, right? Because then they could say, well, yes, brother, I know about that. I know about this and I know about that, brother. Of course. You're talking about so-and-so? Yes, brother. I already know about that. They're full of shit. They're charlatans. They're extremely fake, right? A lot of these black groups and, spiritual groups, or however you want to call them, these groups where they got these fake ass philosophers and, fake ass experts on Egypt and all this other stuff. Those dudes say the most ridiculous shit waiting to be corrected. And then when you correct them, you're teaching them. They tell you they're teaching you. They're not teaching you shit. They're saying what they can figure out or what they know. And then when another person comes on who knows better than them, well, then they learn from that person, right? It's reverse psychology. It's a way to get someone to teach you what you're interested in because you really aren't an expert or you really don't know that much about it, right? So what you do is you go to these people and you say, oh, this, and this, and it's a bunch of dumb shit. And they say no, and they correct you. And that was the goal the whole time. The goal was to be corrected. The goal was for you to teach me what you know, for me to learn from you, because I really don't know, right? You know better than I do. And I'll never tell you that because the goal is for me to look like I know more than you do. It's all a trip. So anyway, I was earlier listening to Suburber Beggar More, right? He's somewhere in the country begging some more, which is what dude does, and that is what it is. Please excuse my sniffling and all this other shit. I do have allergies, and I normally, in the room that I'm in, I have a bunch of fans going and a bunch of air filters running. HEPA filters and things like that running, but I turn them off because it creates a lot of background noise in these recordings, and then that becomes difficult. So I turn them off, and as such, I'm suffering the consequences, right? The air quality probably not that great right now. Pollen probably everywhere. It just rained recently etc., etc. So I'm getting a double dose of that stuff, and you're getting to hear all of the mucosal buildup that is the result of such. I apologize for that. As these, recordings progress, I mean, you're just gonna have to roll with it. You're gonna have to see what happens. You're gonna have to. If you don't feel it, you don't feel it, and if you do, you do. Something that really trips me out is how no matter what, there are people who listen to what that dude Suburban is saying, and for me, it's a trip because I don't like dude. Like there's at this point, I don't give a fuck what it is. There's nothing that will make cause for me to sit down with that cat or to talk to him. So I know there are plenty of people he could say their name till he turns purple in his neck. They'll never talk to him. I wouldn't. I would never. And he don't even say my name. He just shoots little jabs and tries to act like he's slick, right? He acts like a childish ass broad and giggles about the fact that he listens to what I be saying. You know what I mean? And listen, see, now I just did a little Michael Jackson giggle, but don't get that shit twisted. I do that because that's what he does, and not because that's what he does, right? I do that because he mimics me, right? He tries to take elements of what he likes about what I say and what I do and add it to his little program to try to make himself sound better. If you watch his videos from 2 years ago, from 4 years ago, his shit was, at one point, dude was just sad. I mean, I don't give a fuck if it's because of what he caused to happen with his big ass mouth to his own people or not. Dude was broken, right? And now all of a sudden, that's what it is. As this show continues, he takes from people. Oh, and then donate to his Cash App, right? Send $500 to his Cash App. None of you will put $500,000 behind me, and none of you are gonna put drop $50,000 into my Cash App. Ain't nobody gonna give me $25,000 so I can tell you guys what it is. Yeah, probably not, nigga. You stupid. You know what I'm saying? But shit, at the end of the day, what it boils down to is, he says the most ridiculous shit. Like, it burns me to listen to him talking to some of these older women the way he talks to them, talking to some of these older men the way he talks to them, talking to some of these, young people the way he talks to them, knowing that he's just a fucking coward. Like, that's the part that bothers me. It really does. I can't front. And at the end of the day, what I would say about it is, why do they listen to him? Why do they follow behind his bullshit? Why do they listen to what's coming out of his mouth? Why do they lend him the energy to allow him to turn that shit around and be vicious towards them? Or to turn that shit around and to try to play power games with them? Or to talk over them? Or to make it seem like what they're saying is inaccurate. It's like, no, that's like people be correcting him. And he shuts them down. He talks over them. He fucking won't let them finish their thought. He won't let them finish saying what they're saying. And that's all pussy maneuvers. When I say that, I don't mean it in any sort of way that's disrespectful to the actual vagina. I mean it in a way that is like, dude is a coward and a sucker butt. And I hate that people of color lend him their energy to then allow him to keep running his fucking mouth, right? I've been listening to, I'll tell you one thing I did get from Sabir Bey is I wasn't aware of KBLA, the radio station. So I had not been listening to Dominique DePrima in the morning. But it gives me something to do, because now when I get up in the morning, I can have my tea and I can prep and I can do my thing and I can listen to people, whether I agree with them or not, talk about things that may or may not be interesting to me. Besides the point, though, at the end of the day, what it all boils down to is I don't even really feel that Dominique DePrima did the right thing in any way, shape, or form. She fucked up big time because she allowed that maggot ass bitch, that maggot ass bird brain, to have time on her show, on her radio show, right? She allowed that maggot to get onto her platform and to talk about nothing. Now, she shut him down. She proved him wrong, but he'll never personally accept that. You see what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, she accomplished nothing by giving that dude some airtime. I mean, anyone who gives that dude airtime, that made a mistake. Every person who has done that knows that. Tariq Nasheed knows he fucked up, fucking with that dude, giving him any play whatsoever, and he never did it again, right? Kaba Kamini knows he fucked up, even acknowledging that kid's existence, and he don't do that no more. The only few people that still acknowledge him, that he still continues to bite at their ankles. He still continues to backbite, right? And he's not going to stop doing that. So anyway, I'm going to close this. I'm congested. I'm about to go lay it down. Maybe have some Benadryl or something to calm my sinuses down, turn back on my air purifiers, my HEPA filters, my damn ceiling fans, and try to get some of this dust or pollen or whatever the hell it is out of my sinus cavity, because it's causing for me to cough and it's causing for me to sound extremely mucosal, extremely congested, which is not the norm. So anyway, this is Ray Azul Sovereign, Mad Dog Blue, Toady Mo TV, right? And we're going to sign off and sign out.